Everyone tuned into the 25th BET Awards expecting glitz, glamour, and a few viral moments. But what nobody expected was for Tyler Perry, Hollywood's quiet giant, the man known for moving with grace and rarely speaking out, to grab the mic and deliver what sounded like a surgical takedown. He didn't mention names, he didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. Because if you knew the story, you knew exactly who he was talking about. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Disappointment. And just like that, the internet erupted. Before we go deeper, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We break down stories you won't hear from mainstream media, and trust me, what Perry just unleashed is only the beginning of this Hollywood unraveling. Now let's rewind. Back in 2020, Harry and Meghan fled the UK, shedding royal titles and claiming they needed protection, freedom, and peace. But behind the headlines and Oprah specials, one man quietly stepped up, Tyler Perry. He gave them the keys to his $18 million Beverly Hills mansion, paid for security, provided privacy. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It was genuine, no-strings-attached support. He protected them when no one else would. Or so he thought. To the public, Perry looked like a generous friend who understood the pressure of fame and scrutiny. But what we didn't see was what Perry would later reveal through carefully chosen words on stage, how that friendship slowly turned into a one-sided transaction. His BET speech wasn't fiery. It was calm, almost too calm. And that's what made it devastating. Some folks borrow blessings like they're owed, but never return the favor, he said, the weight of those words landing like a slow-building earthquake. The room fell silent. There was no need to pan the cameras to get reactions. Everyone knew who he meant. Insiders say Perry had been biting his tongue for years. But that night, he snapped, and it wasn't loud. It was lethal. Behind the scenes, it started with what should have been a simple ask. Meghan allegedly requested access to Perry's private jet, not just to borrow it, but as if it were her birthright. There was no discussion about cost, no thank you, no acknowledgement of logistics, just entitlement. And when Perry said no, not because he couldn't afford it, but because he felt used, everything changed. Meghan, according to sources close to Perry, lashed out. That moment became the tipping point. What had started as a favor between friends had quietly transformed into a pattern. Meghan didn't just ask for help, she expected it, and not just from Perry. According to colleagues, producers, and longtime staffers, Perry wasn't the only one being drained. Warnings came in. She doesn't repay favors. She hoards support like social currency. And once you're no longer useful, you're out. At first, Perry ignored it. He believed he was helping two people in need. But the truth hit hard as Netflix deals rolled in, Spotify checks cleared, and all the gratitude stayed silent. By the time Perry stepped onto that BET stage, he wasn't just delivering a speech. He was delivering a reckoning, and Hollywood was listening. But this wasn't just about a private jet. According to someone close to Perry's team, Meghan crossed a line that even Perry couldn't stomach. She used his name without his consent in a pitch meeting. Trying to gain access to a high-profile funding circle, she allegedly implied that Perry was a silent backer of her new media project. That lie traveled fast, and when word got back to Perry, he was done. Not just disappointed, furious. He didn't go public to gossip. He went public to protect his name, and that's when the dominoes started falling. Within hours of the BET Awards airing, major studios and investors began distancing themselves from anything involving Meghan and Harry. One producer working on their upcoming Netflix pitch abruptly pulled out. Another investor said bluntly, "I don't want to be involved in something that feels this toxic." The message was clear. This wasn't about the content. This was about the people behind it. And Hollywood, a town that thrives on image and favors, had just been given permission to stop pretending. The silence that followed Perry's speech was deafening. Not from Meghan's camp, they were in full-blown crisis mode, but from the people who mattered most in Hollywood. Oprah Winfrey, once Meghan's loudest champion, didn't say a word. No follow-up interview, no post-awards commentary, no Instagram story with cryptic wisdom, nothing. The alliance that once felt unbreakable had gone eerily quiet. And in Hollywood, silence isn't just awkward, it's strategy. It's distancing. Behind the scenes, Meghan's team was scrambling. Media outlets received carefully crafted press releases, offering exclusive interviews to clarify the situation. Leaks hinted at unseen footage that would explain everything. There was even talk of a podcast rebuttal hosted by Meghan herself, but none of it stuck. The story was out of their control, and the harder they pushed to spin it, the more the public started to wonder, what exactly are they trying to hide? Even loyal journalists began to pull back. News outlets that once fought for a sit-down interview or behind-the-scenes access didn't take the bait this time, because this wasn't about palace protocol or media bullying anymore. This was about someone biting the hand that literally fed them, and then publicly accusing that hand of betrayal. It was the ultimate Hollywood betrayal arc, except this time, the villain wasn't hiding behind palace walls. She was front and center, then came the wave. Former staffers started talking. A former assistant from Meghan's Archewell team described the environment as emotionally draining and performative. They said Meghan controlled every narrative and punished those who didn't align with her version of events. There were stories of ignored advice, micromanagement, and sudden firings when people dared to push back. One producer from the now-defunct Spotify deal said it bluntly. She didn't want collaborators, she wanted followers. And just like that, Meghan's curated image, feminist icon, misunderstood royal, self-made mogul, started to crack. Not because tabloids were shouting, but because insiders were whispering. And those whispers were louder than any cover story. More revelations followed. A respected publicist said Meghan's team had tried to blacklist journalists who asked unapproved questions. Another former employee revealed that any strategic suggestions that didn't flatter Meghan's personal narrative were dismissed. The consistent theme? Control, manipulation, gratitude used as performance, not principle. One former Archewell staffer described it best. It was a place where gratitude went to die. Even people who typically stayed neutral started backing away. Studio execs whispered to each other, joking that working with Meghan's team was like playing chess with a mirror. Every move was strategic, and none of it reflected truth. Nothing is ever straightforward, said one insider. Everything is spin. And that's when the numbers started telling their own story. The numbers didn't lie. Public opinion, once cautiously split, was now rapidly shifting, and not in Meghan's favor. A new poll showed that support for the Sussexes in the US had plummeted by over 30% in just 12 months. In the UK, where their royal exit had already earned mixed reactions, they were now viewed by many as pariahs. But now the damage wasn't limited to reputation. It was hitting where it hurt most: the bank accounts. Netflix executives reportedly began reassessing their long-term relationship with the couple. Internal sources revealed that some planned content had been quietly shelved, budgets frozen, and meetings postponed indefinitely. One exec put it bluntly: they were high risk before. Now they're radioactive. Investors that had once flocked to Meghan's projects for her star power and symbolic appeal were pulling out without warning. Phone calls stopped, emails went unanswered. One prominent investor who had attended 2 planning sessions for a new docuseries told a colleague, "This doesn't feel empowering anymore. It feels toxic." At Archewell, the foundation Harry and Meghan founded to much fanfare, panic was setting in. Several insiders confirmed that internal projects were being paused, and planned hires had been canceled. Departments were suddenly under budget review. What had been a growing media machine powered by fame and emotion was now hemorrhaging trust and momentum. And still, Harry said nothing. For many observers, Harry's silence spoke volumes. Was he exhausted, ashamed, strategic? Nobody knew for sure. Some close to the situation believed he was desperately working behind the scenes to salvage their brand. Others said he was simply overwhelmed, burned out by years of media battles, royal family breakdowns, and now watching their inner circle collapse. While Meghan sent furious texts to Perry accusing him of betrayal, legacy damage, and public humiliation, Harry reportedly stayed on the sidelines. There was no public statement, no counterattack, just silence. And that silence only made the backlash louder. Because what Tyler Perry had done was more than call someone out. He'd pulled the curtain back on a pattern, one many in Hollywood had whispered about for years, but were too polite or too afraid to name. Now that the floodgates were open, everyone had a story. A director who once pitched a charity docuseries idea to Meghan described being iced out after gently pushing back on creative direction. A former partner said Meghan insisted every press release be filtered through her personal tone, regardless of accuracy or context. It wasn't collaboration, it was control, and all of it painted the same picture. A woman obsessed with image, fiercely protective of narrative, and increasingly isolated in her quest to control every detail. Social media, once Meghan's greatest tool for shaping public perception, began turning against her. Hashtags that once glowed with empowerment now swarmed with sarcasm, memes, and side-by-side clips dissecting her contradictions. Clips of Perry's speech were being remixed, stitched, and memed with brutal precision. Users created timelines of favors Meghan had accepted, and how quickly those relationships had dissolved. The internet, once an ally, was now an archive of broken bridges. And it wasn't just strangers piling on. Even longtime supporters, bloggers, influencers, progressive activists who had once championed her, began going quiet. One popular content creator who had built a brand around defending Meghan deleted 3 of her most watched videos without comment. Another posted a cryptic message. Maybe we all got played. For Meghan Markle, this wasn't just another PR problem. This was an identity crisis unraveling in real time. Everything she had built, her brand, her public image, her perceived moral authority, was now under a microscope. She had positioned herself as a misunderstood woman silenced by a centuries-old monarchy, a feminist icon, a modern-day freedom fighter. But now, the stories weren't coming from British tabloids. They were coming from the very people who had helped her, fed her, protected her, and worked beside her. And those voices were saying, she wasn't silenced, she was shielded, and she took advantage of it. Behind the scenes, insiders say Meghan was unraveling. She reportedly fired off a string of furious messages to Tyler Perry following his speech, accusing him of betrayal, humiliation, and damaging her children's future legacy. But Perry didn't respond. Not that night, not the next day, not at all, because Tyler Perry was finished, not just with Meghan, but with being used. Friends close to him said he felt emotionally manipulated for years, pressured to do more. Say less, always loyal, always silent. But when Meghan allegedly used his name to gain investor credibility without his consent, he realized something. Loyalty was a one-way street. And Meghan, she saw relationships not as bonds, but as tools. Strategic alliances, leverage, and when that strategy stopped working, so did the silence. Other voices followed Perry's lead. A respected industry publicist said Meghan's team tried to blacklist journalists who strayed from the approved narrative. A former Archewell consultant admitted that Meghan routinely ignored strategic advice, unless it mirrored her own thoughts. One former assistant described the culture surrounding Meghan as a place where gratitude was transactional and everyone walked on eggshells. The fallout was no longer theoretical. It was material, tangible. Brand deals were paused, press inquiries disappeared, even streaming platforms that once fought for exclusive rights to her story were backing away quietly. Nobody wants to be associated with instability, one executive said. There's too much risk, too much drama, and no accountability. In private circles, people who once aligned with Meghan began distancing themselves. Oprah hadn't called. Netflix stopped emailing. PR advisors were dropping off the radar. Even Archewell's own website updates slowed to a crawl. The once glittering empire was now a dim echo of what it promised to be. And the public had started to catch on. The mask had cracked. And for the first time, people weren't asking, why is everyone attacking Meghan? They were asking, what if this is who she really is? Tyler Perry didn't explode. He didn't rant. He didn't cry. He simply told the truth in a room full of cameras. And that truth hit harder than any tabloid headline ever could, because it wasn't manufactured. It wasn't filtered. It was earned. He was the one person who had given without expecting anything in return. And when he finally spoke, he didn't name names, but he didn't have to. His silence afterward was the exclamation mark. The fairy tale Meghan crafted was powerful, until the people who helped build it began to step away, one by one. This wasn't the royal family silencing her. This was Hollywood, her chosen kingdom, turning off the lights. The illusion was gone, and what remained wasn't a victim. It was a strategist out of options. Now the question isn't whether Meghan Markle can recover. The real question is, how? Many more bridges can she afford to burn before there's no one left on the other side? If you found this story compelling, revealing, or just plain jaw-dropping, hit that subscribe button. We cover the stories others are too afraid to tell. raw, unfiltered, and real. There's more coming, and trust us, this Hollywood unraveling is far from over.